Welcome to Equilibrium Echoes, the podcast where we delve into the transformative power of your inner world on your relationships. I'm your host, Alyssa Decker. Join me as we unlock the secrets of emotional equilibrium and dig deep into the tools and insights needed to foster healthier, more fulfilling relationships in ways that feel safe and authentic. Welcome back to Equilibrium Echoes. I'm your host, Alyssa Decker, and I am here with Andi Hess today from Remix Coaching. I'm really excited about this conversation. We are going to talk about self-sabotage, and not only that, but we're going to talk about how to figure out what you really want, and then how to keep yourself from self-sabotaging on the way to what you really want. So Andi, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really educational one. Self-sabotage is not something we've talked about, but I know there are a lot of people out there who struggle with that, even if maybe they didn't have a terminology for it yet, or they don't yet, but they soon will. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, how you kind of got to where you are right now.
Yeah, so I am a hypnotherapist and rapid results coach. I had a really long career helping people figure out exactly what they wanted in life and how to get it. So it started as a productivity consultant with Franklin Covey and, went into corporate training. And then I was a leadership professor actually for a decade before I hit that magic point in midlife where kids grew up and moved out and, everything shifted, right? And it was really time for a change. And so that's what I do now. I left my role as a professor and moved into doing the coaching more one-on-one. And as I started working with my coaching clients, what ended up happening is, I'm sure if you think about where you struggle in life, it feels like you just maybe need some steps. But then when you start getting into those steps, it's like, actually, this is not about the steps. This is about my fear or myself or, these other things like something that happened when I was in 7th grade that is still holding me back today, right? And so I started noticing that with my first few coaching clients, that what was really holding them back was themselves. And I had been doing self-hypnosis since I was 10. And so I started offering to some of the clients who had kind of been friends before they worked with me, do you want to do a visualization around this? That's how I work through my stuff. And I think it would really help you move past this if we did something like that. And the ones who said yes had just a complete 180. We're still working together for the most part with a lot of them, and we're dealing with completely different things. It's like they have a completely different life at this point. And the ones who said no, some of them I'm still working with on the same things. So that told me, this thing that I had found for myself to really work with my subconscious mind on the real things that were holding me back was a key for me. And I decided at that point I was going to actually go back to school and get like all the tools in my toolbox so that I knew how to use hypnosis, not just for the couple things that I did for myself, but for a whole bunch of different scenarios, different techniques, different tools, all those things. And I love it. I mean, I basically get to say, I say that I basically get to meditate all day long, right? I'm constantly guiding clients through these relaxing visualizations and using this beautiful state of hypnosis to make deep changes in their life. And I mean, what better job is there than that, right?
Absolutely. I mean, anytime you get to do what you love all day long, it's amazing. Yeah. So before we get really deep into this, give us a couple definitions. Like, let's just clarify, because I'm sure there are some people who are like, hypnosis, that's weird, that's way out there, that's a woo-woo thing. Like, tell us what do you mean by that, how you define it, and how you practice it.
Yeah, absolutely. So totally true, right? What most of us know of hypnosis comes from things like stage shows or movies or very sensationalized things like that. And stage shows are real. That's not that's the first thing people ask me is like, that's not real, right? That's a trick. And actually it is real, but not in the way that you think. So when we talk about using hypnosis is a normal, natural state of being that your brain goes through at least twice a day. So when you're falling asleep and when you're waking up, you're going through a state of hypnosis. You're passing through what we call a trance state in between those states of full conscious awareness and sleep. But the reality is most of us are in hypnosis far more often than that. So if you've ever driven home and not known how you got there, that's
never done that.
Never, right? I've only actually had a couple people tell me that they really haven't actually done that, and it's interesting. But we call that highway hypnosis or environmental hypnosis. And if you think about that state, most of us have experienced that, so it's a really easy way to understand this. Your conscious mind is distracted, right? But your subconscious mind is still paying attention to everything around you. That's why you don't die, because if anything like unexpected happens, your subconscious is going to bring you right back, right?
Okay.
But meanwhile, your conscious mind is distracted. And so this is a state where we are able to get out of our own way, right? Because that conscious mind, which is the part that judges things, the part that thinks there's a right way to do this, and oh my God, so-and-so said you should do it this way, and like, oh, but someone else is having success with that, and like, but am I really doing it wrong? It doesn't look like the right way to me. All of those things, those happen in your conscious mind. And so when we get the conscious mind really distracted, then we can actually talk to the subconscious mind, which is doing this thing of keeping us protected, what it thinks is protected. So hypnosis is this state that we all go through. And actually a big part of my job is teaching people how to not be in hypnosis, because when you are overwhelmed and overloaded, you're actually in hypnosis all the time. So if you feel a little zoned out, you're in that trance state, you're in hypnosis. And that is a very unprotected state because you don't have your conscious mind making those judgments and decisions about what's coming in. So a lot of what I do is teaching people how to only go into hypnosis for this purpose of learning, for this purpose of, you know, making intentional change and staying out of hypnosis when we don't want to be in it. But you're also in hypnosis when you watch a movie or a TV show, right? So think about it. You have to, in the movies, they call it suspend disbelief, right? You have to be able to immerse yourself in that other world and forget that you're in this reality in order to really enjoy a movie. And that's hypnosis too. So it's not anything that's abnormal. It's not anything that anybody can't get to. Like every single human being is capable of being in hypnosis because you're doing it multiple times a day. And then hypnotherapy is using this beautiful state, mental state, right? The rest and digest state, the parasympathetic activation state, if you're familiar with those terms, this calm and relaxed learning state for a therapeutic purpose. So you're able to say, I react this way to this situation. I'd rather react that way. And using the tool of hypnosis, this state where you are in a parasympathetic rest and digest state, to make that change safe and known to your subconscious mind.
Wow, that's fascinating because I never really thought about the fact that we are all in hypnosis many times a day. It happens to me frequently with my kids. Like I'll be zoning out, I'll be cooking and I'll just zone out a little bit and they're like, Mom.
Yep.
Right. And that's usually when, well, I don't know if I'm always unaware of what's going on. It's more of like my brain is working on digesting something or processing something. And so I zone out on what's going on around me.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting, it's a really interesting explanation. So when we talk about self-sabotage, like I know so many of us are like, we have goals, we have aspirations, we have things we know we want to do. Yes. And yet we're not getting there. And on some level, I think most of us are probably aware that we're the problem. But like, I mean, I think really deep down, like there's some awareness in most of us that probably our biggest problem is us. And that's of course not universally true, but why does that happen? Like what's going on there where we're like, yeah, I know I need to lose 20 pounds. I want to lose 20 pounds. I have a plan to lose 20 pounds and it's not happening.
Yeah, there's a variety of things that happen depending on which kind of scenario you're talking about, right? So weight loss is maybe a little bit different than, fear or something like that. But basically what it comes down to is actually that your subconscious mind's only job is to protect you. And unfortunately, it's kind of stupid. So I say that jokingly, but it's not that much of a joke.
It's not entirely untrue either.
It's not entirely untrue. It knows two things and two things only. It knows what it calls pleasure and what it calls pain. And if that were the same way that we experience pleasure and pain, that'd be great. But for the subconscious mind, anything that it has not experienced before is considered painful. And anything that it has experienced before is considered pleasure, right? It's known. And so if it's known, it's safe. Because if it's known, then even if it's an unpleasant thing, I know how to deal with it.
Right.
And this is actually why a lot of us will end up in very similar patterns. Like you choose the wrong person to be with over and over and over again. It's like the same person in a different body. Or, every single time you plan for this big project, you sort of crumble the same way right in the middle of it, right? And that is because that is what your subconscious mind knows. Everything it doesn't know, it thinks is going to kill you. No joke. No
so
exaggeration.
Yes.
It literally believes that if I stand up on this stage and speak, someone is going to judge me. I will be ostracized from my tribe and I will die alone in the desert.
Yes. A lot of catastrophizing happens.
Because that's its job, right? Its job is to say that's unknown and so we think it's not safe. And the really beautiful thing about this, right, is that you can actually use that to your advantage. Because first of all, you recognize, right, that every single little bit of self-sabotage is actually from this beautiful place of protection. It's actually trying to keep you safe, right? So there's a good reason for it, and you give yourself that grace. But second, if you realize that that's really all it comes down to, then we can begin to understand how to use that for our own purposes. And the way you do that is that your brain doesn't know the difference between something you imagine vividly and something you actually experience. And, excuse me, there's new evidence, new studies that just came out. I really love this. I've always talked about how we know, like, Olympic level athletes practice what they do in their mind far more often than they do on the court, right? They're running through the motions in their mind and they're building muscle memory just by visualization. But we actually now have evidence that if you visualized working out and you actively visualized that enough, your muscles would get toned in the same way as doing the exercise.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Although, I mean, I can't say it surprises me. I've been studying cellular memory recently, so it's kind of a similar concept. Yeah.
Yes. So, right, that means that we can use, and this is why hypnosis works so well, we can use this beautiful tool of visualization. You can use your imagination instead of to rehearse all the ways something could go wrong, which is simply just forcing yourself to live through all those things because your brain doesn't know the difference.
Mm-hmm.
You can use that to imagine what you actually would like to happen. You can use it to imagine your muscles getting toned. You can use it to imagine, feeling really, you said weight loss, for example, right? Most of the time that comes down to, are we taking good enough care of ourselves? And you can think through a future scenario where you would normally maybe overeat, for example, and you can imagine the version of yourself who identifies as a slim, healthy person and what they would do in that moment. And by making that choice in a visualization and seeing yourself all the way through the activity, you've now made that familiar to your subconscious mind, and that is what it will go to, especially if you practice it enough. It's a beautiful thing. And by the way, I just have to say this. Almost all of this stuff is what we call reparenting. So in that particular scenario, I love to use this example. Your subconscious mind is about 8 years old. Mm-hmm. So I want you to imagine.
Sounds about right.
Yep. There's an 8-year-old running your business. There's an 8-year-old running your life.
That explains so much.
Right? There's literally an 8-year-old making all your decisions. And so I want you to imagine that you were in charge of babysitting for an 8-year-old, right? And at 3 p.m., having not eaten anything all day long, and having forgotten to go to the bathroom, for most of the day, and having zero town time and being on a computer all day, I want you to imagine that this 8-year-old comes to you basically ready to throw a tantrum. And then I want you to imagine that you hand them a monster and say, buck up, keep going. Would you do that?
Absolutely not. And I have an actual literal 8-year-old, so I can say with certainty that is not a good scenario.
Right. No, you would say, go take a nap, or let's eat some food, or we gotta take a break, right?
Like, here's an apple, go outside.
Get some vitamin D. And so, but that's what we do ourselves, right? We're like, buck up, have a monster, keep going, you gotta make it till 5 or whatever, right? Like there's some sort of award you win for holding your bladder through a 4-hour meeting or something, right? And a lot of the self-sabotage simply comes from that. Like we are unable to see, right, this really clear truth that there is an 8-year-old inside of you, and they need to be parented in the same way you would parent an 8-year-old, with the same kind of compassion and love. But I just love that visual. Like, would you hand that 8-year-old a monster and say, keep going? Because I want you to think of that every time you're like right on the verge of a tantrum at 3 p.m. when you've had enough.
And we still, as adults, have temper tantrums. They might look slightly different than they do
because
when
we're 8. Exactly. We're literally 8 years old. That's why we have a temper tantrum. We have not taken care of ourselves like we needed to. Okay,
so this is really fascinating. Let's go back to this idea of, so what I hear a lot in coaching, because I work primarily with women in high conflict relationships. Most of them have been in really bad relationships, sometimes for decades. They get to this place where, we get in a coaching call and I ask them, what do you really want? And they look at me like a deer in the headlights. Like, I don't even know what I want, right? Because I've suppressed my own wants and needs and desires for so long, whether it's to keep the peace or whatever. Yep. So when we get to that point, right? Because I know some people are like, well, I can't even self-sabotage because I don't even know what I'm going for. Like, there's nothing to keep myself from getting to. Yes. And I know a lot of my audience is in that place. So talk about that for a minute. Like, when we get to that place where someone says like, well, what are your goals? What are your dreams? And we don't even know. Like, we can't, we're so out of touch with that part of ourselves. What's going on with that? Talk about that for a minute.
Okay, I love that you ended that with, we're so out of touch with that part of ourselves, because actually the answer is your subconscious does know, right? Like, and that's the thing that is so important to understand, is that you don't get to lie to yourself. And a lot of these problems come because we're lying to ourselves. And yes, absolutely, if we have been in a situation where it was unsafe to dream, unsafe to want, I see it a lot myself. One of the populations that I work with a lot is chronic illness. And there's a very particular kind of trauma that comes from not being able to trust your body, right? Like, I can't even set up this appointment on Friday morning because I don't know if Friday morning I'm going to wake up and be able to get out of bed, right? I can barely even decide that for an hour from now. So how am I supposed to imagine a future that has anything in it when I can't even tell you what I'm going to be able to do half an hour from now? What you're talking about in these high conflict situations, and most of us have also experienced this, not just in our relationships, but say our relationships with our parents, things like that. That's kind of a lot of where it stems from, is a need to regulate someone else's emotions, which is impossible. We can't even regulate our own. So, trying to control someone else's emotions by, those are those feelings of, I'm feel like I'm tiptoeing over the glass, right? And so what I want you to understand about vision and goals and dreams and all of this stuff is that your subconscious does know. And the cool thing about that is that you don't have to figure it out. And my favorite way, of course, is to use hypnosis to put you into a the reason this works is it's the relaxed rest and digest state, right? So it's taking you out of that high conflict, fight, flight scenario to allow you to access those dreams. And then most of the time we have to work on allowing ourselves to want what we want. Because most of us have been taught not to want what we want. Most of us have been taught, I don't need to be a millionaire. I only want to be comfortable. I don't need to, do all of these things. I just want a little bit, right?
Right.
And
yep.
Two things about that. First of all, a watered down dream leads to a watered down life. Actually, three things about that. That's number one. Number two, your subconscious immediately goes, you're fucking lying. Right? And so now it doesn't know what to go for, because it knows that your like deepest soul desire is this, but you're telling it it's this, and none of that matches up. And it's like, well, I'll wait around until you decide. Everything you want already exists in the world. For example, if you're looking for a soulmate, you're not asking someone to grow him in a petri dish. He's out there. Like, he exists. And so the only thing you actually have to do is train your brain to find those things for you. And it cannot do that if you are not honest with yourself about what you want. So a lot of us have heard now of the reticular activating system, or have had this experience where we decide we want like a Toyota Camry, and all of a sudden every car on the road is a Toyota Camry. Mm-hmm. You are swimming in a universe that has everything that you want. You just need to tell your brain what to look for. So that's number two. The third piece of this is to understand that your dream, your vision, whatever you want to call it, was given to you not because of the thing itself, but because of who you have to be to become that. So we have this history of being told that our dreams are really selfish. If for some reason, if I drop into hypnosis and my subconscious tells me I want a Ferrari, right? And I come back to present outer awake life and everyone around me is driving Toyota Camrys and would absolutely skewer me for buying a Ferrari. I can't even imagine being that audacious, right? Mm-hmm. Then of course that's going to feel really uncomfortable. But the thing is, it's not about the Ferrari. Your dream is there to show you what your growth path is. So it is about who you have to become in order to walk into a Ferrari dealership and buy the car. It is about who you have to become to drive around in a Ferrari and feel good about yourself and not feel subconscious. Because by the time you get to the Ferrari, that will feel like nothing. And most of us have had this experience. Right. And my coaching group, we were talking about it the other night, someone was talking about, they thought that getting a nursing degree would make them feel substantially different. And by the time they got to the degree, it was just nothing, right?
Right.
Because it isn't about the degree. It's about who they had to become to get through the degree, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep.
And so the reason this is so important is because it takes that guilt away when you realize that there is no private good, and that whatever is good for you is also good for the people around you. And maybe I need that Ferrari because there's someone else watching me who needs to see that it's possible for someone like me to do this thing. Maybe I need to be an international bestseller because there's someone who needs to see that that's a path forward. Maybe it's because when I am an international bestseller, I will also be doing things with my influence and my money that make a big difference in the world. Maybe it's because the person I will be at that point will, also have a Saturday volunteer position at something else, right? Like, it is not about the thing. And I think a really great example of this that I think most of us at this point can understand is the idea of like social media. So one of my mentors, James Wedmore, will talk about if you can't handle the haters at 100 followers, you're not going to be able to handle the haters at 1,000,000 followers, right?
Right.
And this is the same idea. It's not about how many followers you have. It's about who. Think about it. If you had 1,000,000 followers, right? If that's what you're trying to do and what you're trying to grow, who would you have had to become in order to get there? Right? That is not just about the vanity metric of followers. That's about consistently showing up. That's about having a strategy to talk to a particular kind of person. That's about being able to handle the haters and still showing up again when they make you want to go to bed and cry, right?
Yeah.
And so what I want people really to take away from this and understand about your vision is that it is critically important for you to allow yourself to want what you really want. Even if you have absolutely no idea why you want that. And from my experience, most of the time when we get to our real true vision, that's what it feels like. It's like, really? Really? You expect me to go do that? That sounds really hard. Can't I just snuggle with my puppies? Why do I have to do that? Right? That's how true visions and dreams feel. Because
why is that?
They are there to grow you.
Say.
Because they're there to grow you. They're not there for the thing. They're not there because you for some reason have to build that thing that you think is going to get you there. They're there because by taking the path towards that, you will become the person you're meant to be.
Okay, but if my subconscious is an 8-year-old, how does my subconscious even know what that looks like?
That's a really great question. I mostly suspend judgment on this, but I've heard a couple different ideas that I think resonate. So a lot of this, I think, depends on your beliefs. So some people would say, like, it was given to you by God. I would probably say something like by the universe. There's some people who think that, if you believe in multiple lives or something like that, that we actually pick what, our soul picks what it needs to go through in order to grow in this life. And then of course you have free will, right? You don't have to actually get down here. Well, you don't have to answer that call.
Right.
But I think that's very dependent on kind of what you believe, where you believe we get our purpose from, things like that, right?
Right.
So I can say I know enough about how it works here on Earth because I've been practicing this. So, for example, a line in my bio is, that my branding coach made me stick in there, is that I checked off my entire bucket list by the time I was 37. I was so productivity focused, right, when I was growing up even, and, just really obsessed with this idea of I guess because that's what I heard, right? You set a goal, you hit the goal. You set a goal and you hit the goal. You set a goal and you hit the goal. That's the way it's supposed to work, right? So that's what I did. And most of those goals for me really came from, kind of a deep and desperate need. And I think that that's kind of how it starts usually. It's usually, actually this wraps it back to the way you asked the question. It's like, I need money so that I can feel like I'm not afraid of poverty, right? And when you frame it like that, in terms of what you don't want, in terms of the fear, in terms of the scarcity, in terms of, I only need money because I'm really afraid of being in poverty. Maybe I had that experience before, right? And I know I want to stay out of that. Or I need love because I've had really bad relationships and conflict, and I know I don't want that anymore, right? When it starts from that, there's actually no amount of that thing that will make you make you get over that fear. So for example, if what you're afraid of is poverty, I don't care if you're making $10,000, $100,000, $1 million, there is not going to be a time you are ever not afraid that you could lose it all and that you could be in poverty, right?
Right.
And this is why it's so important to own it from a place of vision. Because if instead of that, you honor that, I need money because my soul says I want to do something really big with that money, right? Then there is a number where it's enough. Or maybe it's even like, I need money because and I'm using money because it's just a really easy example that most people can identify with, because we all have a lot of limiting beliefs around money. If I say I want $100,000 to stay out of poverty, right, that's never going to be enough. If I say I want $100,000 because that will allow me to take, a trip to these 3 places that I really want, then there's a purpose for that, and there's a number that is enough. There's a number that,
Right.
like, yeah, that will accomplish that for me, and it is enough, right? So, bigger amounts of money, what do you want to do with that money? If I want, $1 million so that I can donate $500,000 to a particular charity I really care about, then there's a number at which that's enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about staying out of poverty. So I guide my clients in hypnosis to allow those visions to come. And most of us just haven't allowed it to come. And generally what I've found, probably 99% of the time, I can't even think of an actual example off the top of my head where someone couldn't get to a vision that really came from within. But I'll allow that maybe there's a 1% there or something. It is mostly about the allowing. It's that it's never been safe to dream.
Yeah.
And so I don't know necessarily where it comes from. That might be up to your belief, but I know it's in you.
Yeah. And I agree with what you said because, I see that in like the scenario I gave you way back at the beginning of this question about the woman in my coaching who's like, I don't even know what I want anymore. That is often because for so many decades, years, whatever it's been, it has been unsafe to have those dreams or even to speak them out loud. Sometimes it's unsafe to speak out loud what you want for dinner. So your subconscious adapts to that. Like you said, it's like, I'm just going to sit here and wait till you figure it out.
It's only trying to protect you, right? And so if it thinks that actually making a decision or wanting something is unsafe, it's not going to throw that up for you so that you can actually see it and activate it and things like that. And, to go back to your example of that woman, I've had a lot of clients as well who are, and I generally work with women in their second act. So kind of after these, divorce, career change, kids move out kind of things. And a lot of them are, in that dating pool and have never had a really good relationship. And one of the best ways, if you're really in that spot where it's just not even safe to vision and you don't even know how to make it safe, one of the things that I really encourage them to do is to begin collecting little bits of evidence of what they want. So, for example, if you're looking for love and you don't have a particular partner in your life right now, start recognizing where you do have love. Maybe it's a different kind of love or something like that, but where you are experiencing love in your life. So maybe that feels like, this friend calls me on a regular basis to check in, and that makes me feel really good. And you can begin to focus on that feeling and you can say, okay, I know that one thing I want is to feel like this more. When I'm doing vision boards and stuff, this is also how I usually ask people to do relationships. Instead of like a checklist of like, these are the things I want in a person, it's more of how do I want to feel in a relationship? Do I want to feel cared for? Yep. Okay, if I want to feel cared for, what does that look like? Maybe that's a picture of breakfast in bed. There's not a particular person that goes with that, but there's an act of service or a, particular consideration or something that brings out the feeling that I want to have. And you can start with that, and it's really powerful. I also suggest that exact same thing when you start dating. So even if you're dating the wrong person and you know that like this is not working out, which pieces in there make you feel good and make you feel bad? And begin to create a vision based on that. We focus most often on what makes us feel bad, which is why we know what we don't want. But what also makes you feel good, right? What originally, maybe you felt seen, maybe you felt like you were important, maybe it felt like, power is a huge dynamic in relationships. Maybe it just made you feel safe, or maybe because, and by the way, you can feel safe in an unsafe situation if safe is what you're used to, because of what I explained about how the subconscious works, right?
Yep.
The unsafety is the only thing I know. So that's what feels safe. I know how to deal with this drama, right?
The unknown is worse.
Yes, exactly.
Than the familiar.
Yeah. Exactly. So begin picking those pieces, same thing with abundance. Even if you're like living in poverty right now, right? What things make you feel abundant? I'll give you an example of that. I just had a client I was talking about, whenever I was over in Europe, they would always serve me water in a wine glass, and sitting there at like, a freaking roadside table or whatever with water in a wine glass. Just made me feel really fancy. And it was like, why don't I do this at home more? And of course, I never remember it when I'm home, but I did remember it last week when I was at a party and everybody else was drinking wine and I was having a sparkling water. And I was like, I'm going to put this in a wine glass. And I sat there and I felt, it just felt really up-leveled, really abundant, really fancy. Did that cost me anything? No, it doesn't have to. But what will give you the feeling that you're looking for right here, right now? What ways do you already experience that? That is the biggest thing that shifts your subconscious mind. Because again, evidence makes it known. And whatever it knows is what it will accept.
That's really powerful. Okay, so one last question. I was sitting here listening to you thinking of an email I got this week. And the opening line of the email, I don't want to give away any identifying information, but the opening line of the email basically was, I was raised. Okay, so here we go, right? Because we all have these childhood things. I was raised that in every conversation, the stronger person is the one that keeps their mouth shut and walks away. And she went on to talk about how she's really struggles to stand up for herself in any kind of relationship or conversation. And so I'm curious how you would answer her, or how you would address that from this perspective of the subconscious and hypnosis.
Yeah. I love this because this highlights another little piece of this for me. So we have what we call a critical filter. Remember I said when your conscious mind, it judges and decides and things like that. And when you're always in hypnosis, you're just kind of unprotected. The way that your conscious mind, your filter, decides what to allow in is based on the experiences you had up until about 8 years old. That's why we say the subconscious is about 8 years old. That's when the conscious mind really develops the logic and decision-making portions. That's when kids start going like, all these books say Santa comes down the chimney, but we don't have a chimney, right? Like, something is wrong. Yes. You have one, so it's probably right about that age, right?
Right. Yes. And how did the baby get in there and all?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, it's really funny because I know a lot of people who can't shut up, right? And so this particular question, what it brought to mind for me is, that's actually the opposite of what I was originally expecting as you started to say that.
Yeah.
Because when you
That's why I asked it about this particular question, because it is the opposite of what I normally hear as well.
Exactly. So like I expected you to say that this email was about, power is who dominates the conversation, right? That's how a lot of people interpret it.
Who can yell the loudest?
This highlights that actually all the stuff your subconscious is basically fact-checking against is relative. There is no truth that it is like going out to try to find. There is only the truth of your own experiences. And those are different for every single person. And this is why, if you went for a walk with your mom and came across a cute, fluffy little puppy or whatever, your subconscious goes, ooh, dogs are cute, fluffy, good, right? Positive association. But if your best friend at the same age goes walking along and a big old stray dog, hops out and bites you, it goes, dog, scary, negative, right? Negative association. Right. And so this is one of those situations, and every situation is like that. So this is just a really good example of highlighting why this is the case. There is some scenario, right, down there that we internalized that said, this is how we do it. There is not a single truth ever. It is just a combination of neurons that lined up over and over and over again to create a pathway, right? Mm-hmm. And you can use that. So one of the ways that we deal with that in hypnosis is actually, this is how I did my healing journey. I looked for every single little trigger I could find. So we call something a trigger because when you experience it, it activates that entire chain of neurons. You don't even recognize all the different neurons that it's activating. You just know the thing that just happened makes me want to cry and there's no freaking reason for it. And I don't understand why there's so much emotion around this thing that shouldn't matter at all.
Right.
But again, You don't have to figure it out. Your subconscious knows. That's why it's activated. So, unlike talk therapy, which I'm very much a fan of, I think everybody should have multiple people in your corner. But unlike talk therapy, which is often focused on trying to figure out why that thing triggers you, what we can do in hypnosis is we take this, again, this really calm, resting state where your nervous system feels safe. And we activate that trigger. And it goes all the way down to that original memory that you don't even know is there. And we can re-experience that information in a relaxed nervous system state, which begins to remove the emotion from it. So people will often ask me like, oh, can you just like make me forget all this trauma? Or can you make me like, can you remove these memories or things like that? And that's a misconception too. We don't actually want to remove the memories, even traumatic ones. What we want to do is remove the emotional intensity from the memory. And that is what you're talking about now. So with this particular request, I would, you don't have to know why that makes you feel that way, but let's go in and basically tell your subconscious mind, yo, subconscious, I know you think that this is a sign of power, but that's kind of a misinterpretation, and we can be confident and speak up for ourselves and still be powerful, and that's okay, and begin to make a new neural pathway. And I mean, that is at the core of it. That's what my expertise is. It's how to say that to your subconscious mind in a way it will accept, in a way that will shift that, that narrative for you. But that's what it really comes down to, is experiencing that in a calm nervous system state.
And that's really key, isn't it? Too? Because that's why lecturing ourselves doesn't work, right? We can 100%. Say it to ourselves 1,000 times, and we're just beating ourselves up and beating a dead horse, basically. Because it's knowing how. The example
that I give, right? The one that I like to use when I'm onboarding new clients is, let's say that you and your beautiful conscious mind make a decision that I want to eat less chocolate cake, right? Chocolate cake's great. I don't want to hate chocolate cake. I just would like to be in control of my chocolate cake, right? But what you don't know is that there is some teeny tiny memory down from like when you were 3 years old that says chocolate cake equals grandma's love. And so you could tell yourself that, and this is the you can't trick your subconscious mind thing. You tell yourself that, and you go to sleep at night, and you pass through hypnosis. So you pass through this state where your mind is doing the fact checking, and it goes down to fact check this bank of your experiences, and it says, oh my God, Alyssa, you clearly have forgotten. Grandma's love is really important to us. I don't know why you would make such a silly decision, but it's my job to keep you safe, and we definitely want to keep grandma's love. So we are just going to literally vent out that decision and let that go, because that makes no sense whatsoever. This is critically important for us to keep. And you wake up the next morning and you're like, damn, I'm craving chocolate cake. What the heck? Right? And you don't realize that it is because you just simply have this association. So we go and we tell the subconscious, yo, subconscious, chocolate cake is good. Grandma's love is good. They're actually two different things, right? Notice this is done with love, not with the judgment you were just talking about, not with the lectures, not with the, well, you just are lazy and need more willpower. No.
Right.
Your subconscious is like, don't you care about grandma? Like, why are you doing this to yourself? And so that is the key to it, is with love to say, that doesn't need to be an association anymore. We can be more in control of our chocolate cake and still keep grandma's love.
Which brings us back full circle to that idea of our subconscious being an 8-year-old, because most of us would never look at an adorable 8-year-old and say, you stupid idiot, how could you possibly think, right?
Yep. Yep.
I love how that came full circle. Beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yes. And if you think about our lives between when we're 0 and 8, that's why I like the chocolate cake example, because we're told over and over again that food is comfort, food is love. You get hurt, oh, here's the doctor, gives you a shot, here's a lollipop, right? Like, that's what we're taught. And that's how these associations happen. And they happen at that age.
And they happen so young that we often don't have any conscious recollection of them. So fascinating. Yeah. All right, Andi. Well, we're almost out of time. Tell people how they can connect with you, where they can find you online, follow you on social media, all the things.
Yep. I like to hang out on Instagram, so you can find me there at Remix Coaching. And the link that I put in my bio has all of my current links, so all my upcoming summits or events or anything like that where you can find me. And so that's remixcoach.com/links.
Awesome. We'll put all of that in the show notes below the video, so you can click on those things and go connect with Andi, follow her on social media, connect with her through however. How do you primarily work with clients? You've mentioned a group program and private clients here in this conversation.
So I love working one-on-one with people. I do take private clients. I'm very, very picky about who I take. It really needs to feel like I can help you and that you're in a space to do that kind of work. And I love working with particularly entrepreneurs and ambitious women who have decided it is time to live my vision. So I have one-on-one for people who need a little bit more of that kind of trauma recovery and need to deal with particular memories or behaviors. I have a group program that is about how to do this whole manifestation thing. Like, are you getting everything you want from writing your 3 gratitude pieces every night? Probably not. I can show you why. I can show you how to actually make that work. But we do a lot of work in there over all of these things that are holding us back too. So I work both ways, and I also have a hypnosis library if you just are more of a DIYer and want to listen to recordings and kind of work on yourself, which is of course how I did it at first. And then I got my own hypnotherapist and all this stuff too. So
awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, taking the time to have this conversation. I think it's been
for having me. It was so much fun.
Yes. I love it when we laugh our way through a somewhat serious conversation. It's a great way to learn.
It could be funny.
Yes. Well, before I sabotage this conversation, I'm going to say thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on Equilibrium Echoes. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Equilibrium Echoes. If you would like to learn more about the podcast, visit www.coachingwithalyssa.com/podcast. And while you're there, book your free consultation and download the preview of my new book, Marriage is Hard and Other Lies I Believed. I'll see you in the next episode.